Hello students, and welcome to the third lesson of scientific investigation in integrated science. We've already did 2 lessons concerning this scientific investigation. Today being the third lesson, if it's your first time, subscribe, like, share and comment. Now, if you missed the past 2 lessons, they are there on my videos. You can view and watch them at your own time. Now, dear students, we've been looking at scientific investigation. In our first lesson, we did the introduction of scientific investigation in general, integrated science. There we looked at the definition of integrated science. We said it's a broad area of study that deals with different branches of science. We also dwelled on the importance of integrated science, and we did the laboratory safety. In our lesson 2, we also continued. We looked at common laboratory hazards, importance of following instruction while in the laboratory, and so on. So today, in our third lesson, objectives, we will look at the basic scientific skills, use and care of laboratory apparatus. We will also look at the apparatus used to measure volume, the apparatus used to measure mass and weight, apparatus used to measure temperature, length and time. So dear students, move with me as we demystify, unpack and navigate through this in a very magnetic way. Number 1, let us look at what we call basic scientific skills. When we talk about scientific skills, these are the skills that we acquire or that we use when we do practicals in our subject integrated science. So we have several skills that we come across. We say that they are a set of abilities used to gather information when carrying out experiments in the laboratory or in the classroom. So when we do experiments, there are some of the set of activities that we do. So it involves skills, and these skills include to have manipulative skills, observation skills, measurement skills, classification skills, prediction skills, communication skills, and conclusion skills. Dear students, these skills are very, very crucial and important. In our exams, in most cases, we are asked to explain 5 skills, and that is 10 marks. So let us be able to understand these scientific skills. To begin, when we talk about manipulative skills, we say it is the act of handling work by use of hands. When we measure the length of a book, or when we connect a circuit, we use the work of hands. That activity that we do, we use the skill called manipulative skills. Therefore, students, when you come across a question, they will not tell you manipulative skills, but they will give you an action. Like for example, they tell you a student measured the length of a locker. Then they will ask you, give the type of scientific skill that he used. You should be able to know that this is what we call manipulative skill, because it involves work, the handling the work by use of hands. Number 2, we have observation skills. Observation skills, we use the senses that we have. We can use eyes to observe, to see the color and say this solution is colorless. We can say this solution is purple or pink. We use eyes to make observation. Hope we are moving on well. Now, we can also touch. You can touch and say this is cold, is hot. Then you can make an observation by using the skin. Then hearing. You can determine hearing by using what? By saying that this is a loud sound or it's not a loud sound. Smelling and tasting. Remember very well, we say that while in the laboratory, we don't test anything. Therefore, testing can also be used to make observation, but it is not recommended while in the laboratory. You are not supposed to test because you can be poisoned. Then we talk about measurement skills. This involves using tools with standard units to gather the information. Dear students, these measurement and manipulative skills are two different things, but they tend to confuse learners. When you talk about measurement, it involves using tools like, for example, we have here, this is a meter. It has what you call standard units. We can have, this is the inches, then we have the centimeters. So if you measure, you can measure this one. You say that it is around 75 centimeters. So that tool that we use to measure, that skill is called measurement skill. Remember, at the same time, you are applying what you call manipulative skill, because you are using what? The work of the hand. But at the same time, you are doing what you call measurements. Now, let us move on. Classification skill. Classification skill involves using observation to group the things based on similarities and differences. Dear students, when you are doing a practical, you can classify things according to the similarities or the differences that exist between the things that you are doing. Now, prediction skills. This involves stating the expected outcome of the future based on the past observation. So prediction, somebody can predict what will happen in future basing on what has been happening in the past. And therefore, that type of skill is called prediction skills. Then you have communication skills. It involves using words, graphical symbols such as pictures, photographs, graphs, and diagrams to describe action or an event. That type of skill is called what? Communication skills. Then we have conclusion skills. It involves giving a summary of what you have learned or of an experiment that you have done. That is what we call a conclusion skills. Dear learners, in exams, we rarely miss a question on basic scientific skills. Question can tell you to state 3 scientific skills or explain 4 scientific skills. Learners, let us be well equipped when such a question arises in exams. Now we are done with the first objective of the day. Second objective is use and care of laboratory apparatus. We said very well that laboratory apparatus are delicate and most of them are expensive. When we look at them, most of them are made up of glass, so they are delicate to break. Therefore, when we use them, we should be able to handle them with a lot of care. For example, a microscope. When you hold a microscope, ensure you hold a microscope with 2 hands, not 1 hand, because it can break and it is very expensive. So the importance of carrying apparatus in the laboratory is that we can avoid losses that can arise. Also, it can protect us from getting injured, because when a glass apparatus breaks and it can cut you, resulting to what we call an injury. Now, dear learners, move with me as we look at apparatus that are used to measure different units. So we have apparatus in the laboratory where we use to do experiments. These apparatus, they are used to measure different things. We can measure volume. In the laboratory, we can also measure mass and weight. In the laboratory, we can measure temperature. We can also measure time. And we can also measure length. And so on. So in this lesson, I want us to continue by looking at apparatus used to measure volume. Now, what is volume? That's the first question. Volume, what is volume? Dear learners, we need to understand volume. What can we measure when it comes to volume? We measure the volume of liquids. These liquids include what? Water, include kerosene, and so on. So we say that in the laboratory, while doing experiment, we measure volume of different reagents that we use. Now, while in the laboratory, remember we do experiments, and when we do experiment, we measure the volume of different reagents that we are using. Now, the following apparatus are the one that we use to measure volume. So in an exam, a question can come and ask you, name two apparatus used to measure volume. You should be able to know them and they are drawing. Or they can ask you to draw any two apparatus that are used to measure volume. Now, number one, we have what we call a pipette. We have a burette. We have a volumetric flask. We have a syringe. We have a conical flask. We have a beaker, a eureka can, and a measuring cylinder. So these apparatus are the ones that are used to measure volume of given reagent. Now, when you talk about a pipette measure what we call accurate volume or fixed volume because it is given 25 ml. For example, this pipette is used to measure 25 ml. And remember, we have a mark. So this mark, it means that when the solution reaches at that mark, it is accurately 25 cubic centimeter or milliliters. Therefore, students, we need to know and understand. Now, we have another one called a burette. Burette is well calibrated. From 0, here is from 0 to around 50. We should be able to understand how a burette is used. We say that it is calibrated from 0 mark to 50. So if a solution is at 30 here, if you want to measure the volume of this solution, you take 50 minus 30. You take 50 minus 30. It's now you get 20 cubic centimeters. So know how to use the burette. And when we are measuring volume, we use the lower meniscus. For example, if you have an apparatus like this, we have the upper meniscus and the lower meniscus. This is the lower meniscus. So when we are measuring volume, we don't dwell on the upper meniscus. We dwell on the lower meniscus. Hope that one is clear, students. When you use the upper meniscus, you will not get the accurate answer. Let us be able to understand that. So when using a burette, we subtract from 50, we subtract the figure we have. We take the figure we are having, subtract from 50 is when we will get the accurate volume. Now we have what we call a volumetric flask. Volumetric flask, they have different sizes. We have a 250, we have a 1000, have a 500 metric flask. So we should be able to understand. It's used to measure fixed volume. It works the same as what we call a pipette. It has a mark. Therefore, when the solution reaches at that mark, it gives the accurate volume that is required. We have a syringe, measure and transfer accurate volume. Conical flask, it is used to measure approximate volume. It approximates. So learners understand the apparatus used to measure approximate volume and accurate volume. When you talk of accurate volume here, we can use what? A volumetric flask, we can use a pipette, we can also use a burette. Remember, a conical flask is used to measure approximate volume. We have a beaker. It measures the accurate volume of liquids. Why accurate? Because it's well calibrated. It has the calibration. So you measure according to the calibration given. Measuring cylinder, it also measures the accurate volume. Eureka can master the drawings, the name of the apparatus, and the use. Remember, all of them measures volume, but in different contexts. Now, Eureka can is used to measure volume of irregular shaped solids. Later on, as we continue, we will be able to learn more about the Eureka can. Students, before we move on, if you've not subscribed, subscribe to this channel, like, share, and comment. If you have any question, I will give out my number at the end of the lesson so that we can communicate. Now, let us move to the second part of our lesson. That is apparatus used to measure mass and weight. We have mass and we also have weight. In the laboratory, we do measure mass while doing practicals. Now, apparatus used to measure mass and weight, they include, we have what we call an electronic balance. This uses current, electricity, we charge it, then at the end of the day we use. Or you can get that one which has got a cell. It uses the current. It automatically shows the mass. Remember, mass can be given. We can measure mass in grams. We can measure in kilograms. So in most cases, it measures mass in grams. So those are the units that can be used to measure mass. I have another one called a top band balance. I have a beam balance and a spring balance. So in exam, they will ask you to mention, state two apparatus that are used to measure mass in the laboratory. Be able to understand. Now, apparatus used to measure temperature. Students, temperature. What is temperature? We say that temperature is the degree of hotness and coldness of a place, an object, or a body. Now, to measure temperature, we measure temperature in Kelvin and also in degree Celsius or centigrade. So the units for measuring temperature is in Kelvin. Remember, the SI unit of temperature is Kelvin. We can also convert from Kelvin to degrees and from degrees to Kelvin. Later on in our lesson, we will be able to understand how to convert from one unit to another. Students, we say that to measure temperature, we can use a thermometer and a thermometer. This is an example of a thermometer that we can use. We can use a thermometer or a thermometer. So those are the two apparatus we use to measure temperature. In an exam, they will ask you to state two or one apparatus used to measure temperature. Or they will draw for you and ask, what is the function of the following apparatus? Be able to answer that. Number 6, we have apparatus used to measure time. Students, time. Time is the measure of a given duration. Is the measure of duration of a given event. So when you are doing a given event, when you measure time, that duration that you use. For example, you go to the chamber for 2 hours. That 2 hours is what you call duration. So the event you are doing, you measure the duration, that's what you call referred to as time. Time can be measured in seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, weeks, years, and so on. So let us be able to know how to measure time. The units that are used to measure time, remember the SI unit of time is seconds. These are other units that we can be able to use. Apparatus used here include, we have stopwatch, watches, we have stopwatches, stop clocks, and so on. So let us be able to know the apparatus that are used here to measure time. Then we also have apparatus used to measure length. What is length first of all, dear learners? Length is the distance between two fixed points. For example, from this wall to the other end. That distance between the two walls is what we call the length. The distance between two fixed points is what we call the length. Now, to measure distance from one point to another, there are some apparatus that we use according to the need or the demand required. Remember, length is measured in meters, centimeters, kilometers, hectometers, and so on. But the main units that we normally use meters, centimeters, and kilometers. Now, instruments that we use, they include what we call a meter rule. This is an example of a meter rule, students. It's the one that we can use to measure length. We have what we call a tape measure. Tape measures, we can also use tape measures. We have micrometer, screw gauge. It is in our textbook. We can go there and look for the image of the micrometer, screw gauge, so that you can be able to master and know how it is used. We have what we call a vernier calipers. So we have the micrometer, screw gauge, have vernier calipers, tape measure, and meter. Students, we are almost coming to the end of this lesson, but let's remind ourselves what we've learned. We've learned about basic scientific skills that we need to know while in the laboratory. These are the skills that we gain, we use when we are in the laboratory. We use what? Creative skills, observation skills, measurement skills, classification, prediction, communication skills, and conclusion skills. Learners, let us ensure that we get them into our fingertips. Then operators that we use to measure volume, we must be able to understand them and their uses. Operators used to measure mass and weight, understand them, master them. Operators used to measure temperature, we need also to know. Also operators used to measure time, and operators used to measure length. Now learners, we've come to the end of our lesson. If you've not subscribed, subscribe, like and share, and also comment. If you have a question, you can reach me on my number 0117449659. Have a nice day. Let us meet in the next lesson.